I had a very good day today because I discovered dolphins in the Pali Canon.
Ooh.
It's really hard to communicate just sincerely on social media. You have to actually say, this is a real question, or I'm not being sarcastic, because sincere speech is such a rare thing. And yet sincere and kindly words are what builds a community. I invited them and gave them a bit of chat, said hello. And then they said, well, we've got a monastery to give you. If you want do you want a monastery? It's like a few hundred acres. It's really nice. When building a spiritual community, one of the great flaws that I see all the time is that the institution becomes the goal. The institution is what's valued, and people are valued for how well they serve the institution. And we need to remind ourselves that the institution is there to serve the people, not the other way around. And if the institution is not serving the people, what is it even doing? All of those nuclear weapons are in the hands of responsible people. Or
Nice try, Bhante, nice try.
There was a disciple of the Jains who wanted to try to trap the Buddha in a rhetorical dilemma. You're only teaching about generosity so you can make lots of money. And so he went to the Buddha and said, where should I give? And the Buddha said, give where your heart feels inspired. And he says, oh no, I've lost that one. Yeah. The Buddha's like, what do you mean?
Friends, welcome to episode 25 of Vibe with Venerables. 1 hour of live Dharma and dialogue where you get to talk directly to a respected Venerable. I'm Meng, co-founder of Buddhism-dot-net and your host. Today is session number 3 of the 4-session series with Bhante Sujato exploring conflict. I like to always say that Bhante Sujato is the best. And then I realized I was even more correct than I thought, because before his ordination, Bhante's name I found was Anthony Best. Bhante is literally Mr. Best. Like, who knew?
Who knew?
Yes. So besides being best, Bhante is also a highly respected scholar and teacher, creator of Sutta Central, and founder and abbot of Lokanta Vihara.
Anyway.
Today's topic continues to be conflict. So last week we learned from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta the 7 principles of non-decline that can lead to peace. Right? Do these 7 things the Buddha said, and the community and the country will not decline, and there will be peace. And this week we'll continue to learn more about resolving conflict. So as usual, Bhante will speak for roughly 30 minutes and then answer your questions live. And as a reminder, again, this session will be recorded and uploaded onto YouTube later. If you are comfortable doing so, we would like to invite you to turn on your camera so that Bhante can see all your lovely faces on the screen in front of him. With that, my dear Bhante, can we invite you to start with a prayer and a blessing?
Sure. Jayanto bodhiya mule sakyananandivardhano evang tavang vijayo hijaya sujaya mangale aparajita palanke sise patavipokare abhiseke samba buddhana nagapato pamodati sunakatang sumangalang Supabhatang suhotitang sukano sumuhoto chasuhitam brahmachari su padakinang kaya kamang vacha kamang padakinang mano kamang panidhite padakina nikatantwana labhantate padakine. Sadhu. So thanks.
Sadhu.
Thank you so much, Meng, for that very kind introduction, and very good to see you all again here today. I'm here on the land of the Barramadigal people of the Darug Nation in the place today we call Parramatta. It's a beautiful spring day here in Sydney. For the last week or so, we've been having the fellowship of the Metta Convention and meeting a lot of friends, monastics from around the place. So that's very nice. Including Venerable Ju Wei, who I'm not sure if she's here today, but she was on the class last week. And I was talking to her yesterday because I just came back from a Bindabata, and I mentioned it to Ju Wei yesterday, and she said, how are you going to make it in time for the 5 with Venerables? I said, oh, I should be able to make it. So she's keeping better track of my schedule than I am, so that's good to know anyway.
Bhante told us in advance not to panic if he doesn't arrive for the sound check, and then we were like, okay, how shall we panic? We were planning the whole panicking scheme. So good thing we arrived, so we didn't have to put in our panic protocol.
That's excellent. That's excellent. It's always good to have one of those. Actually, I should mention, Meng, I probably shouldn't mention, but I do want to mention I had a very good day today because I discovered dolphins in the Pali Canon.
Ooh.
Yes. So there's the word susumara, which is normally translated as crocodile, but the Sanskrit equivalent sometimes means crocodile and sometimes means dolphin. And I found that there are a couple of contexts where the sense of dolphin actually is probably the correct one. So one of those is where the Buddha compared 6 animals with the 6 senses. I'm sure you probably remember that sutta in the Salayatana Samyutta. And each of those animals has something that relates to the sense in particular. So where the susumara is where the ear is. And that was the only one I couldn't figure out. Like, why is a crocodile related to the ear? Like, what's in common between the crocodile and the ear? The Ganges dolphin is almost blind and moves about by echolocation.
Ooh.
Right? So once you realize that, you realize, that's perfect. That's why it's the ear. Yeah.
Wow. That's a great discovery. Thank you.
Thank you to Sanskrit dictionaries, Wikipedia, and YouTube for that discovery. But the Ganges dolphin is threatened and is very rare. It's close to extinction. So I can't save the animal, but at least we have a record of it in the Pali Canon now. Anyway.
So, by the way, anybody who wonders, this is a typical conversation I have with Bhante in private. I mean, you think that you talk to a Buddhist scholar, Pali scholar, you think, but it's like this all the time. It's always fun.
Always trying to find. You've got to keep yourself entertained, otherwise, yeah.
I know, right?
All right.
Okay, back to work.
So we have a couple. We're going to continue with our discussion on the theme of non-conflict, and obviously, as I think I've mentioned each week, this is hardly a topic that we seem to get any better at. I mean, I think it's a bit crazy, really, that humans have not worked out better. We've put so much effort into trying to resolve conflict and so many mechanisms. And I'm not cynical, and I do in fact believe that there are genuine advances that we've made, like as a society, towards non-conflict. And it's easy to forget history. I mean, it's easy to forget that most, for example, European nations were usually at war with each other pretty much most of the time for hundreds of years, if not thousands. And then since we've had the EU and the UN, then that hasn't really happened. And, now we see a lot of these institutions under threat of breaking down. And I think it's easy to be cynical about them. And obviously they're all imperfect. But the essence of it is really that there are 2 methods of resolving conflict. One is to have a cup of tea and a chat. And the other is to bash each other over the head with clubs until one falls down. And that's what's happening currently in Ukraine. And it's a method which has been employed right across the world in so many different places. And nobody seems to, we all fall into the same trap again and again and again. It seems so strange. Needless to say, the Buddha was not a fan of that particular method of resolving conflicts, and was much more of a fan of the let's sit down and have a chat and talk about our differences kind of way of solving problems. Now, one of the things that has always really struck me about this is that conflict or peace is not something that is merely just happens by default, but peace is something that is constructed. It's something that is built, and there are people all around the world who are building peace every day. And so something I think it's really important for us to contemplate as spiritual practitioners is not just how to avoid conflict is one thing, but how can we meaningfully contribute towards constructing and towards building peace in whatever context that we find ourselves in. So I'm going to today read perhaps one short passage and perhaps another if we have some time. Let's see how we go. I'm just going to pop a little sutta in the chat there. It's Aṅguttara Nikāya number 9.5. And it's only a short sutta, but I'm not even going to read the whole of the sutta. I'm just going to read one part of it. Okay, and I'm going to look at the 4 ways of being inclusive. Saṅgaha-vatthū. So this is a set of dhammas, which is quite. It's not one of the. It's not one of the super big ones, but it is quite well known and quite popular in Buddhism, but not one of the most well known texts. I'm actually going to put another sutta in the chat, which is a bit clearer and has a bit more detail. It's 4.32. It's the same teaching. Anyway, 4 ways of being inclusive. What 4? Giving is Dāna, kindly words, Peyyavajja, taking care, Atthacariyā, and equality, Samānattatā. These are the 4 ways of being inclusive. And then the Buddha or the sutta adds some verses to this. Giving and kindly words, taking care here, and treating equally in worldly conditions as they deserve in each case. These ways of being inclusive in the world are like moving a chariot's linchpin. Interesting simile. If there were no such ways of being inclusive, neither mother nor father would be respected nor honoured for what they've done for the children. But since these ways of being inclusive do exist, the astute do regard them well, so they achieve greatness and are praised. So this is a simple sutta that's very typical of the Aṅguttara Nikāya type of sutta. So for those of you not familiar with the suttas, briefly, the Aṅguttara Nikāya collects teachings by numbered sets. And often those numbered sets, the explanation of the sets is then followed by a set of verses. The verses often, like when you read the verses, sometimes they'll expand or reflect on the teachings in the prose, but often the verses more or less just repeat what the prose has said. And the reason why that is because they are there. The inclusion of the verses helps to preserve the meaning. So this is one of the keys to reading the suttas, is that when we see a lot of the like repetitions and different phrasings and so on that we find in the suttas, a lot of these are techniques whose purpose is essentially to keep a backup copy of your data. And I'm sure that all of you are tech savvy, and I'm sure all of you have up-to-date backups of your hard drives, just in case. And if you're not, then you should probably do that. And so the Buddha wanted to keep backups of all of the information. And so this is why there's very few teachings in the suttas. You'll never find really a major teaching. Just some minor things might occur once, but most things occur many times. So that if one passage gets corrupted, if somebody forgets it, or if they misconstrue it somehow, then there are always a dozen others which can clarify. So this is why you find so much repetition in the suttas. Okay, so let's just briefly consider these 4 ways of being inclusive and what this means. So it's a saṅgaha-vatthū. So the purpose here, the idea here is that these are 4 ways of building a community. That's really what the Buddha is talking about here. He's talking about how do you treat people in such a way that they're going to be drawn and feel like they are included, feel like they are welcomed, and feel like they are wanted in that community. Giving, kindly words, taking care, and equality. So I'll just say a few words briefly on all of those. So giving, of course, is one of the cardinal virtues of Buddhism. Now, please don't take it personally, but maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I have observed that in American Buddhism, sometimes we start with emptiness and nibbana, and then go from there down to jhanas, and from there down to dependent origination, and then maybe make it to the Eightfold Path. And then at the end of a long, long line, we finally dribble down to generosity at the end of it, perhaps. So this is sometimes can be a characteristic of a spiritual path if we take the purpose of a spiritual path as what can it do for me, right? And of course, this is the inverse of how Buddhism is practiced in traditional countries where Dāna is very much the forefront. That's the first thing that you learn is Dāna and devotional practices. So Dāna traditionally, of course, is the giving of alms to the Sangha, and that's still a very important part of the practice of Dāna today. Today, we, as I mentioned a little earlier, we went for Pindabata with the group. My friend Venerable Prasanna and a few Dharma friends met in Burwood. We went for Pindabata, went for alms round, and had some lunch together. Everybody shared their meal. And that's just a beautiful thing to do together. It's very simple, actually. It doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be fancy, but to enjoy a meal together and to share your food. The Buddha said that if you knew, as I do, the value of giving and sharing, then you would never eat alone. This is powerful words. These are powerful words. To imagine how powerful it must be for the Buddha to say that you would never eat alone. So Dāna is, of course, there are many other dimensions of Dāna, and I can hardly touch on all of them here, but I'll just mention briefly about there's a contemporary movement, which I'm sure many of you may have heard of, called effective altruism, ultimately building off of an idea by Peter Singer, that we should basically maximize the effectiveness of our giving. And just so you know, Peter Singer is kind of historically a bit of a hero for me. I've read his Animal Liberation when I was a kid, and it was one of the books that really kind of opened my eyes. And he sort of had this idea, well, we should give effectively. And it's one of these ideas which, to a certain extent, is very reasonable, right? But then it can also become an extreme. And if we looked at the way that the Buddha talked about giving, yes, he did talk about the effectiveness of giving, but he also talked about a lot of other qualities as well, which tend to balance that out. For example, he talked about giving in terms of establishing a personal connection, like giving with your own hands. There's something meaningful about that, about the fact that there is another person here, and I, this person, am giving something with that person or sharing something with that person. And there's something meaningful about that you can't reduce to a set of numbers. And so I think that these ideas that we should be giving effectively, yes, to a certain extent, obviously it's worthwhile to consider, like if you're running a charity, are you running the charity efficiently? Are you putting too much into administration costs and so on? Definitely there are areas where that's important. But as with everything, just keep a sense of balance to it. Don't get swept away by these ideas, because giving is not just about that other person. It's also about ennobling oneself. It's about what kind of person are you that would live in the world without sharing what you have. And I think that if we see more of a balanced perspective of giving, then it's something which I think should be something which I think should turn our minds towards as a foundation for our Dhamma path. Now, giving, of course, is a wonderful way of resolving conflict before it happens. Because you're not likely to get in a fight with somebody who's just given you something. You're going to be nice to each other. You establish a nice relationship with each other. And so it's something that you can proactively do rather than sort of going around and putting out the fires, right? Trying to quench conflict where it comes. Have that spirit of giving. And I think that one of the things I'm sure which probably all of you are very conscious of is that in modernity and in modern society, there are very strong forces that are arguing for a relentless meanness in our public life, in not caring for others, not giving them healthcare, not giving them food, not giving them homes, as if somehow these problems will go away if only we can be cruel enough. And the practice of giving is not just so we can effectively solve problems. Like, we can effectively solve problems. Like Finland solved homelessness by, you'll never guess this, giving people homes. I know, shocker, right? And these problems are solvable, but it's also about who we are, right? So giving ennobles the giver as well. So the second one, kindly words, right? Kindly words. So again, if we think about it in terms of conflict and resolving conflict, then it means that we use our speech proactively in order to create the kind of society, the kind of culture, the kind of community that we want to live in. And we live in a world where language is being degraded to an astonishing degree. The meaningless, the cruelty, the heartlessness of language is just debasing the very idea that we can somehow share meaningfully. Like you can't, it's really hard to communicate just sincerely on social media. You have to actually say, like, this is a real question, or I'm not being sarcastic, because sincere speech is such a rare thing. And yet sincere and kindly words are what builds a community and what builds a harmony. It's something I've actually noticed in Buddhist communities for a long time. And, you know, I'm sure all of your Buddhist communities are different, so I don't want it to generalize, but something that I've seen in Buddhist communities is that people often don't really take care of strangers. Like somebody comes into the center and everyone ignores them. It's wild. I've seen it happen so many times over such a long period. And I honestly don't quite understand it. Happened to me some years ago when I was in Thailand. I was a guest at a monastery. All of the monks were there, the resident monks. And then a couple of visiting Thai monks came in and everyone ignored them. And this is the Western monastery. Most of the monks there were Western or international. And a couple of Thai monks came in, everyone ignored them. And it's a duty under Vinaya to welcome strangers. And to welcome a stranger is one of the most beautiful things that you can do. Everyone ignored them, and I invited them and gave them a bit of a chat, said hello. And then they said, well, we've got a monastery to give you. If you want do you want a monastery? It's like a few hundred acres. It's really nice. So this is how this can go. It happened at the talk that I gave the other day as well. A new lady came. I'd never seen her before. I said hello. Everyone just ignored her. And I just said hello. And while I was talking to her, two people came up and just butted in the conversation as if she wasn't there. What are you doing? So kindly words, you know, if you just say hello, it doesn't take too much, you know. Nice to see you here. And just to be inclusive and bring people together. So this is part of a role of a teacher or a leader, but it's also something for everybody in the community as well. Okay, next one, taking care. Atthacariyā. So atta is your welfare. Now, looking after people's welfare also is a way of proactively building a community, which again is a way of proactively overcoming conflict. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that we don't wait for conflict to happen in your community and then start doing conflict resolution procedures. You build the community spirit from the beginning so that we have that resilience, and then the conflict hopefully won't arise. I mean, it probably still will, but at least you've got some basis there. So taking care here has both spiritual and material dimensions to it. So within a physical, material dimension, one of the things that's really obvious to me from sort of, I grew up as a monk in Thailand and in the villages, especially in northeast Thailand, is to see how much the monastery was a locus of community building, for not just for the Sangha, but for the village as a whole, and even for the town and the district as a whole. People come to the monastery, they hang out in the kitchen, they chat, they do a work project together, they offer the food together, they come, they do the chanting, they meditate together, and they build trust. And over time, people are building trust. And then somebody says, we ran out of water the other day. And somebody else says, there's a government sponsorship for putting in new water tanks in the villages. And someone says, but I can't do that. I don't know how. And somebody else says, well, I know how. And then you've got a new water tank for the village. These kinds of things are happening all the time because of the connections people are making in monasteries. Food is another one, because people are offering the food because of the Dāna. But if you're in a Buddhist country, especially a Theravadan country, you know that you can always get something to eat in a monastery. You just can. You can show up, any village, any town, whatever, and there's always some food around. No one's going to turn you away. And, you know, you can pick up a broom and sweep a path or clean some dishes or something like that if you can. But the food, there will always be something there for you. And, you know, it is kind of interesting if you go around, you know, countries like, I mean, it's, say Thailand's not very poor these anymore, but still in those days you could go to the villages and things like that. And the villages were, you know, underdeveloped and they didn't have much money, but you didn't see like a lot of really grinding poverty. You know, there was people didn't have much, but there was a sense in which there was a safety net that was offered through the monasteries. So there's like a material benefit for this. And it's not just, you know, the physical things. You can also have a place to stay. Often, you know, people would go there for refuge, or, you know, we would have like, say women would come to the monastery who, you know, maybe their man was no good or something like that, and they were looking for a place of safety or a place of refuge, and they'd come and we give them a place to sleep. And these kinds of things would happen all the time. So that idea that we're looking after people's physical well-being, but also, of course, especially their mental well-being and their spiritual well-being, which, of course, is also the atta, or the goal. So when building a spiritual community, one of the great flaws that I see all the time is that the institution becomes the goal. The institution is what's valued. And people are valued for how well they serve the institution. And this is something that seems very, very difficult to overcome. And yet it must be overcome. And we need to remind ourselves that the institution is there to serve the people, not the other way around. And if the institution is not serving the people, what is it even doing? Yeah? What are we even doing? So in a monastery or in a spiritual community, as soon as you hear things like people saying, oh, yes, but what about the reputation of the blah, blah, blah? So what about the reputation of the teacher? What about the reputation of the group, the monastery, the organization? Then immediately you know that people are valuing the institution rather than the people. So an institution's reputation or prestige or success is not something which you can force. It's something which arises because people see the way that people are living and they respect that, and that's where the reputation comes from. So Atthacariyā means that whenever you have any kind of group or spiritual community, that it is about looking after the genuine welfare of your community. Now, this is something which ideally is the hallmark of what political scientists would call a liberal democracy. So a liberal democracy essentially is a place where one mob gets elected by their followers. And once that mob's been elected, they govern on behalf of everyone. That's the deal. If you get elected as the government, then your job is to look after all of your citizens. That's a liberal democracy. And an illiberal democracy is where you get elected by a certain mob and then you look after your mates and you don't care about the rest of them. You know, that's illiberal democracy. And the illiberal democracy is the defining government form of our time. Yeah, obviously in the United States, but also to an increasing extent all over the world, in India, China, Brazil, so many different places where this same kind of thing happens. And those ideals that we are supposed to be living up to, we should be living Atthacariyā. We should be looking after everyone. And that applies in your family, it applies in your Dhamma group or in your workplace just as much as it does in the nation. That the purpose of that is to look after everyone and not to just take care of your mates. Which brings us on to the last one, which is Samānattatā, is equality. So samana is evenness or equalness. It's an abstract noun from that, and it means equality. fun fact is that some people like to say, oh, Buddhism doesn't have a virtue of equality. And if you're talking about equality, they'll say, oh, this is just a modern Western idea. Also, another fun fact, they're wrong, because here we are, it says it right there, is equality. And this has been fundamental to the Buddhist value from the beginning. And I don't know what people are smoking that they would say the Buddha has no virtue of equality. I'm like, please give me some. No, I wouldn't. I would never say that. I would never say that. I would never smoke drugs as a monk. I did smoke drugs once as a monk, but only by accident. Okay, they were burnt. I was in.
How do you smoke drugs by accident?
I was in Thailand. I was going for alms round in the village. This is in Dāna in northern Thailand, and somebody was burning off their yard. And I'm walking past, and there's this smoke billowing across the road. I walk through this cloud of smoke. I'm like, that's a familiar smell. And
do you experience like piti and sukha?
Not really, not really. I just remember that when I got back to my hut, I picked up my cloth and I just dropped it. I'm like, oh, dropped it. I thought, oh, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Where were we? Yes, equality. So, I mean, actually, this is fundamental to Buddhist ethics, right? So that the whole kind of may all beings be happy, right? We're not judging and discriminating. The basis of Buddhist ethics is that there is a fundamental level of equality. Now, one of the things which seems to be somehow confused sometimes, but it's a fairly basic moral distinction, is that equality of value or equality of rights doesn't mean equality of treatment. Right? So people sometimes be treated differently because people are different. That's fine. But people have an equal worth. That's what it means. And as soon as we start undermining this equality of value, that's when things start to go bad. It's when we start to say that some people are somehow less human than others. If you're disabled, for example, then you're a bit less human. Or if you're trans, or if you're gay, or if you have the wrong skin color, or if you are from the wrong ethnic background, or speak the wrong language, or have the wrong religion, or heck, if you have the wrong eye color, who knows? All of these are completely arbitrary, and they're ways that people use to devalue other human beings and other human lives. So when building a community, it's really important to have not just equality, but also the appearance of equality. This is something that's been done with, I can't remember the details now, but they did it with like animal experiments as well. Like if you have two dogs and you give one of them 2 little treats and the other one only 1 little treat, then they'll get very upset, right? Actually, he's got a treat. You haven't mistreated the dog. He's got a little nice treat, but the other dog's got 2, and so he'll be upset. Yeah? And that perception of unfairness and inequality is really the source of a lot of resentment that people have. So when forming a community, then this is something which is really important to try to address. One of the contexts to bear in mind is the fact that we live in a world that is in fact unequal. And what are we to do when addressing the fact that there is inequality, and people in the room with us, as in the room today, have different experiences of equality and inequality. And some people, like myself, I tend to be somebody who, in most cases, is more equal than others. I'm white, I'm a bloke, I'm from a developed country. I don't know. I rank pretty high near the list of I just take it for granted that people are going to be equal and so on. And that's not something that I find I get personally challenged on. But most people are not in that situation. And most people have issues around their racial background, their gender, and all of those different things. So it's really important to be sympathetic to those things, to be compassionate, to respond to the specific conditions that people bring, because those specific conditions are not just like harmful things that have happened to people, but they are also wisdoms that they can contribute, that can help us to expand our compassion, So through listening through different points of view is how we can grow. We shouldn't see it as an imposition. We shouldn't be complaining that it's too hard. We should be grateful to have the opportunity to learn, because when we are learning, we are expanding our notion of humanity. That's what equality does. Equality leads to us expanding our notion of humanity, rather than all of this meanness and division and all of that stuff, which is cutting off more and more and more of our humanity. And that ends up in a very, very dark place. So equality is a fundamental property of moral conduct, and a fundamental quality of building communities, of being inclusive, and of putting out the fires of conflict before they even get started. So these are the four saṅgaha-vatthū: giving, kindly words, taking care, and equality. So it's a little bit earlier than normal, but I maybe finish that there for now, and maybe have some conversation with Meng or some questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, dear Bhante.
Yeah.
So before we begin our discussion, let's take a moment to absorb and digest the teachings. So let's take a moment to breathe. Reflect on what we just learned and how it relates to our lives. And thank you for your attention. So friends, let's begin our discussion session. And if you have any questions for Bhante, or if you have any reflections you want to share with Bhante, please use the hand raising function on Zoom, and I will invite you to unmute yourself. So Bhante, I have a couple of questions. Maybe I just do one because there's already a hand up. Saṅgaha-vatthū. You translated it as ways to most inclusive. I've seen it translated in other ways, like how to embrace people and so on. It's like, why is it so hard to translate this? And what is the literal translation?
Yeah, so the literal translation would be sang is together, and gaha is to grab. So there's actually grabbing together or holding together, something like that. So you can I can't remember what other translations are now. Do you remember what Venerable Bodhi uses?
No, I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's always embracing others or something.
Something that maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely about community building. But the I'll see if I can find it on DPD. But to me, like when I was translating it, it seemed, and when I was sort of reflecting and considering it, it seems to me to really relate to that idea that we would call inclusivity. That you're looking out for each other, that you're making sure. So here on the Digital Pali Dictionary, the various meanings I have: looking after, inclusion, encompassing, maintaining relationships, support, and so on. Yeah.
So literally it means bringing people together.
Holding people together. Yeah.
Holding people together. I like that. Holding together.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So I know that this became really important in later in Buddhism. Like in Mahayana Buddhism, these four things are like one of the core pillars of Mahayana.
Are they? Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the core of the Bodhisattva path. I mean, it's almost literally the first step of Bodhisattva path is to treat people this way.
Ah, really?
Yes.
That's
something you don't know. Wow.
that is something I didn't know. So congratulations.
Thank you.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting because I don't know if it's. I mean, I don't know if there's a direct relationship, but it definitely is something that you often see that Mahayanists are very good at. Especially I've noticed with like Taiwanese Buddhists, Vietnamese Buddhists, they always have that warmth and that inclusiveness, and they always want to bring people together. That's something that I've tried to emulate as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Jiwon, you have a question? Please unmute yourself.
My question is, so today you talked about giving, and I guess maybe I read it from Dhammapada story, although I'm not sure. But before, I didn't think about much when I was giving. But after reading what is better giving, for example, rather than giving something to a maybe normal person, lay person, maybe
Okay.
giving something to the monk or enlightened person is maybe better. I don't remember exactly, but something like that was written. Definitely like offering something to the enlightened person is much better and something like that. After that, I began to donate more to the Dharma organization than the
Okay.
environmental organizations. But
Okay.
recently, and I was believing that, oh yes, actually donating, like offering for Dharma organization is fundamentally solving the sufferings of the world. So this is actually having a bigger impact. So that's the better thing. That's what I thought. But still,
Yeah.
I could not let go of the attachment to the environmental sustainability. So I was donating also to the other organization, but I made that portion smaller. But recently, I met Thai activist, and
Okay.
he's my friend, and told me, Jian, in Thailand, everybody's just offering things to the monks only because they think that's a better merit, and they don't care about the poor people, and they don't share their things to the poor people. Then who will help
Right.
poor people? So I
Exactly.
felt very sad, and I was also like seeing myself, reflecting
Yeah.
myself, like so. Yeah, so I'm confused about this kind of thing. Also, like you mentioned, the quality of the giving, like giving with hands. So,
Right.
like recently during our class about Buddhist spiritual formation, someone said now he's just donating online. So he honestly doesn't feel anything. Me, so oh yeah, felt
Yes,
like oh yeah,
exactly.
that's my story because I even don't know if
Right.
that my money is gone or not. But when I'm giving someone in front of me, I feel much more. It's much coming like from my heart. So,
Mm.
but in terms of effectiveness, maybe I should think how I should spend my money because I have limited amount of money. But I
Mm.
end up giving more money to the people who is in front of me because that happens just spontaneously. But I
Yeah.
don't know. This may not be the most wise thing. Maybe I should donate more to people who are more in need or to more Dharma organizations. So I don't know like how to navigate these kind of things wisely.
Okay. Okay. No problems. No problems. Jian, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah,
Jian.
Jian.
Jian. Jian. And no problems. Thanks for asking those questions, Jian. Okay, so look, let me give you the answer that the Buddha gave when he was asked, where should I give? He said, give where your heart feels inspired.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would I say that?
Yes. What do you mean, did the Buddha say that? I just said the Buddha said,
Maybe saying
what do you think?
conflicting things to confuse me.
Yeah, okay, maybe I would sometimes, but no, not in this occasion. No. Yes, I can find the reference for you and send it to you. So, in that particular case, there was a disciple of the Jains who wanted to try to trap the Buddha in a rhetorical dilemma, and by going and asking him where should he give donations, and then when the Buddha said, "Oh, you should give donations to my community," then he'll trap him and say, "Oh, you're only teaching about generosity, so you can make lots of money." And so he went to the Buddha and said, where should I give? And the Buddha said, give where your heart feels inspired. And he says, oh, no, I've lost that one. Yeah. The Buddha's like, what do you mean? So give where your heart feels inspired. And that, to me, that's really important, again, because it's about your emotional connection to the act of giving. And that point that you mentioned before, Gian, about like someone who gives online and gives automatically, they don't feel anything. And yeah, that's how it goes. And it's not, look, any kind of giving is good. So that's not to say that it's bad to be giving online or whatever. Sometimes maybe that's the only way you can do it because you don't have time and whatever. I understand. So I would never say that any kind of giving is bad. but ideally you want to make a connection. And so you give where your heart feels inspired. It's worthwhile to reflect about, like, what is a way that you can give that's going to be useful, that's going to be effective, and so on. But don't get too caught up in that, because these things are always contingent and they're always changing, and you can't control them too much. If I was to say, like, okay, so first of all, to address the question about like giving to Sangha and giving to spiritual organizations. So the idea there is that those pathways of giving are good because people practicing the Dhamma are practicing to end suffering. And when you're practicing to end suffering for yourself and for others, then that gift will be very effective for that regard, okay? However, I would also say that we live in very different times, and we live often in very prosperous times where many, if not most, Dhamma organizations have too much stuff. And the bigger problem for the Sangha today, far bigger problem, is not that people are going without, but that people have too much. And obviously that's not always the case, but often it is. And this was an observation made many years ago by St. Francis of Assisi. He said that, it's weird how the poor rundown church in the village, nobody puts any money in their donation box. But if you go to the huge cathedral that's dripping with gold and diamonds, then everybody will give all their money to that one. And so this is often what you find, is that the big organizations are collecting lots and lots and lots of money, whereas there may be small organizations that have very little and even can't. But just to tell you a good example, in Australia, we had a Tibetan community down in a town called Ballarat. They had a whole thing where they built a huge stupa, and they had this whole emerald Buddha thing, like one of the world's biggest pieces of jade, which was carved into a Buddha. It's worth millions of dollars, was paraded around and so on. But they had Sangha members there who had to pay rent to be able to live in the Dhamma Center because they couldn't afford to keep their Sangha members there. But they can spend, I don't know what it was, millions of dollars on building this stupa. So there has to be a bit of a sense of balance. And in some cases, that balance has got way out of whack. So personally, if you want to give to the Sangha, have a look around and see who's in need. If you want to have a shortcut to know who's in need, the nuns, typically. And again, this is straight out of the Vinaya, but the Buddha said to the monks that they shouldn't, like one of the rules for the monks is that they shouldn't be receiving alms food given to them by nuns unless that was donated specifically by the lay people for that purpose. Why? Because it's difficult for the nuns to get alms and difficult for them to get donations. And the Buddha already made that observation 2,500 years ago, and it's still true today. So generally speaking, you'll find the women's communities both have less support, but they're also very filled with very sincere practitioners. So if you want to give effectively, that would be my recommendation. But yeah, if your heart feels that you want to give to environmental causes or to anything like that, then please give according to your inspiration. And I tell you what, the more you feel inspired to give, the more that you'll give. All right?
It's true.
Sometimes I feel like I'm ignorant, like, sometimes people advise not only for giving, but people are saying, follow your heart. But I also heard that, like, one Buddhist master said, follow your heart is very wrong because many people, they just are confused what is like truly from the inner nature, like Buddha nature, and just their desire coming out of like ignorance. And me, as an enlightened person, I feel like many times I feel very ignorant. So I kind of, maybe I lack of my confidence in like, oh, am I doing the right thing kind of thing?
Sure.
Of course,
I understand, but then you've done the right thing because you came and you asked for advice. You weren't certain, and that's what you've come. So now you've got the advice, so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Bhante, I have another question. In the passage that you quoted just now, you talk about moving like moving a chariot linchpin. What does that mean?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Let me come back to that. Okay, ete ko saṅgaha loke, these ways of being inclusive in the world. Ratassa niva yayato, like a moving chariot's linchpin, right? So ratassa, of a chariot, ani, linchpin. So this is the right. So this is the linchpin. This is the thing that holds the chariot together. So this is the, there must be, I'd have to go back and just double check the, I haven't done my annotations for this sutta yet. So I haven't sort of spent like a week researching this one particular term, which I promise to do at some point. But yeah, it must be like a pin probably that's like holding the what is it, the front part of the chariot onto the back or something like that, or that's holding the wheels on or something like that. Yeah. So like a moving chariot's linchpin. It's probably the wheel, right? It's probably the pin that's holding the wheel together. Yeah. So that's what that would be. So the ways. So this is the wheel. Yeah, is rolling. Pull that out.
so holding, like bringing, keeping people together is compared to that linchpin of the wheel.
Yeah, and it's moving, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right. So you pull it out, and the whole chariot has a disaster. Yeah. Yeah. Good simile, right?
That's right. Yeah. Now that I see it, yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something else you said earlier was impact. I mean, a lot of things you say are impactful, but there's something that stood out, which is that you say that in Western Buddhism, like generosity is kind of the last thing we think about. But
I mean, that's a generalization. I don't want to be a stereotype.
It's actually true, right? I mean, even on this show, right? We do all this, and then at the end I say, "Oh, please donate to Bhante, blah blah blah." I put it like at the end. So, but you're right. I mean, like in Asia, where I came from, it was like the first thing we learned as Buddhists is generosity, right? And then when I got older and I started reading the sutras, I found out that's also the first thing the Buddha talked about. It's the first of the paramitas, the perfections, things you're perfect to become a Buddha. Is number one. So, and then the other thing related to that you talk about is that in a monastery, in a traditional country, people don't go hungry, and a hungry person can just walk into a monastery and get fed.
Right.
So does that mean that in those countries there are no hungry people, and is it something that we should replicate in Western countries?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say there's no hungry people, but I'd certainly say all my time in Sri Lanka and Thailand, I never saw endemic hunger, really. Dhirayupa might have something to say about that, but that's certainly my experience. I'm not sure. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions, but generally speaking, that's my experience. What do you think, Dhirayupa?
Yes, in fact, I don't know about now, but so when you go to a temple, there's always leftover food. So the monks would eat first, and then lay people, and of course you can have poor people come, and the lay people usually there's lots of food, so poor lay people could get food.
Yeah.
So they should not go hungry, and but I don't know about now. But I would still think that it would still be the practice that if you are poor, you can go there, and lay people who offer food to the monks would offer food to these poor people. So it's not like poor people would just jump in and take the food. Usually they know that. Yeah, but in general, no.
Yeah. And I mean, we do a similar thing here in Australia. Like when I get too much food on my alms round, then I'll take it to a local community centre. When we were at Santi Monastery, we used to take things. There was a mental institution not far in the local village. We used to take things there for the folks there, that extra that we had. And when our donors found out, then they just started making an extra stop, and they'd go there on the way and take things there as well. So, we shouldn't see that these things are in conflict. They support each other. Yeah.
So just also like Bhante said, there are some monasteries who are rich, like Bhante said, Wat Bawon in Bangkok. They are like in the middle downtown Bangkok, and they got a lot of food because, like Jian said, people think that when you offer things to monks, you get lots of merits. The thing is, the monks were very wise. They kind of used this. They got lots of food, so they distribute all the leftover food to poor people around the area in the neighborhood. So that then encourage lay people to offer things to this rich monastery. You know what I mean? Because they know that this rich monastery is in fact practicing Buddhism, giving out to the poor.
Right. Sadhu. Yeah, good.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question or comment from Jiwoon, who looks remarkably like the previous Jiwoon. Yes, right. It looks exactly the same as the previous one.
The different journalists to ask like something at a bigger scale. I want to ask last time actually about this question. So I had a conversation with a Japanese friend that I come from South Korea, and she told me, Jian, actually, I feel very insecure because Japan by constitution cannot have an army. You can only have self-defense army. I don't know in English term, but they can only self-defense.
Yes.
So but actually she thinks they need to develop nuclear weapon to protect their own country, not to invade. Actually, she's doing peace work. So like, if she is a president, she will not do that. However, as Korean, we have been invaded numerous times by Japan. So I felt very scared. And then also, but I also know that like Koreans feel insecure that like we have been invaded by so many countries, and then Koreans also like claim, oh, we maybe need a like nuclear weapons. In this case, we know like the consequence of this developing nuclear weapon is gonna be very disastrous. So I was really wondering how we can prevent this kind of thing.
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Jion. I was not aware that there was that movement in Japan. I mean, it makes sense. And in South Korea as well. I'm afraid that in Australia, there's also noises to the same direction. We're starting to get some nuclear-powered submarines, not quite the same as nuclear weapons, but I kind of feel it's like a step along the way for people. Anyway, and this, of course, is the madness that gripped the world during the Cold War, especially the US and the USSR. And the stories from those times are just unbelievable. You know, the government, the US government, even had little idea of how many bombs were being built and what they were being built for. And the people who were building them were having to resort to, the stories are incredible, having to resort to like finding targets that would be just like a field or something like that, because all the main targets have been obliterated dozens of times over, but we still have to justify another 1,000 nukes. So all this field could be used to make a landing strip or something. So we'll do that. And the justifications just getting thinner and thinner as they go. And this is kind of feverish madness that gripped both USSR and the US in those times. Hopefully, I mean, these days, you know, all of those nuclear weapons are in the hands of responsible people. Or
nice try, Bhante, nice try.
So we've saved because we know that they would never do anything rash or stupid or act impulsively. I don't know. Yeah, look, honestly, we should have that. There should be, you know, there should be a global ban for nuclear weapons. Maybe nuclear weapons are one of the things that simply shouldn't exist because the cost of using them is too high. And I think that as Buddhists and supporters of peace, we should be clear about that and make a clear policy to that regard. Basically, as soon as you build a nuclear bomb, then you're saying that whoever has control of that nuclear bomb can blow up a city whenever they want. And nuclear bombs last for a while. It's not like you're just building a new one every year, right? They're around for a long time, and the nuclear stockpiles in the US and the USSR have survived through multiple changes of administration and doctrine and all of those things. And so there's literally no possible way to guarantee even if you put in all the safeguards in the world, there's no possible way that you can guarantee that they will be used responsibly, even if there is such a thing. So to my mind, this is too much power to put in the hands of such fragile and dubious institutions as governments and defense departments and ministers of war and these kinds of things. I mean, it's completely irresponsible and should never have happened. I think the world, I grew up in the 80s in Perth, and we were doing nuclear protests and so on then. And my whole life, my perspective has always been that I've always seen that nuclear weapons were bullets, were guns pointed at the heads of my family. That my family and my friends and everyone I've known is being held hostage to the whims of the geopolitical powers. So yeah, I don't agree. I think it's reasonable for nations, if we're going to have nations, then they're going to want to defend themselves. Perhaps we shouldn't have nations, but while we have nations, that's what they're going to do. But nuclear weapons are not going to help.
Thank you. Okay, I guess that's all we have time for. Imagine we have no countries, right? And no religion too. Okay, Bhante, can we please invite you to lead us on the closing dedication and blessing?
Okay, sure. Etavata cham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata cham mehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata cham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhyati.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Friends, let's bow to our teacher. Thank you, Bhante, for being with us. Always the biggest problem with having you is always there's not enough time, because you're always so fun to talk to. So friends, this recording will be uploaded onto YouTube, onto our Buddhism-dot-net YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, tell all your friends. If you're inspired to practice Dāna, or generosity, as we talked about earlier, how important it is, please donate directly to Sutta Center, the Bhante's organization. We will be sharing the link by chat and by email. So all good things must come to an end, even the best. So next week will be Bhante's last appearance with us for this series. Don't miss it. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you, friends.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.